I set my cup of coffee on the kitchen windowsill and looked outside through the tulle curtains. The October sun illuminated the maple trees in the yard, their leaves burning orange and scarlet. At 74, I still get up at 7 in the morning out of a habit developed over decades of working in the print shop. Now that the business has been sold and my wife Dorothy is resting in St. Matthew's Cemetery for the 5th year, the morning hours belong to me alone. Yesterday's Mooresville Daily lay on the kitchen table. I flipped through the pages without much thought to the content. Local news, car dealership ads, real estate listings, nothing of interest. My coffee was cold, but I finished it and headed into the living room, where the utility bills were waiting for me on the desk. At the desk, I opened my checkbook. My handwriting was still solid despite my age. Years of working with the typesetters in the print shop had accustomed my hands to precision. I wrote checks totaling $342.75 in 10 minutes. Not much for a man who had saved money all his life and spent it wisely. After breakfast, the decision to garden came naturally. Dorothy's roses needed pruning before winter, and the lawn needed one last mowing of the season. Dorothy loved those roses more than anything in the world. "Roland, look how beautiful they are," she said every summer. "Now I take care of them myself, though I'm not much use. They don't bloom as lushly as they did with my wife, but I keep cutting, watering, fertilizing. Memory obliges me to do so." The work had taken about an hour when the creak of the gate made me turn around. Frank Milton, my neighbor on the right, was walking down the path, waving his arms and muttering something to himself. He'd always been chatty, but in retirement, he'd become unbearable. Every day he found an excuse to stop by and share some news. "Hello, Roland," he called out from a distance. "How's it going?" "I see you're trimming the roses." "That's right, it's going to freeze soon." I straightened up and wiped my hands on my jeans. "Hey, Frank, what's new in this fine town of ours?" "Here's what's new." Frank stepped closer and lowered his voice like he was about to tell me a state secret. "This morning I saw trucks outside the old McDonald's building on Main Street. You remember that place? There used to be a stationery store there, and then it stood empty for about 5 years. Of course I remembered that building, a 3-story brick structure in the center of town, built back in the 30s. "What's going on in there?" "Someone's renting." Frank was clearly enjoying my attention. "The workers say it's going to be a beauty parlor. Can you believe it? A beauty salon opening in the center of town. Some serious investor, judging by the scale of the renovation. A beauty parlor." Those words came back to me with a sudden vividness. Sabrina, my son Kevin's wife, has wanted her own salon for years. She is a hairstylist and works at a small establishment on the outskirts of town, but she constantly talks about wanting something of her own. Every time they come to visit, she strikes up a conversation about what a great business beauty salons are. "Interesting," I said to Frank, trying to hide my sudden unease. "Who are the tenants? Local or someone from a neighboring town?" "I don't know that," Frank said. "The workmen are silent. Apparently they're well paid for their privacy. But judging by the amount of materials they're bringing in, it's serious. Marble for the trim, expensive plumbing, Italian fixtures. Not on a dime, that's for sure." After the neighbor left, I could not concentrate on the work in the garden. My thoughts kept returning to the words about the beauty parlor. Sabrina often complained about the lack of startup capital. "If we had 50,000 to start with, we could open a place that would have all of Mooresville coming to us," she said. Kevin always agreed with his wife, but they didn't have the money. I went back into the house and brewed myself another cup of coffee. My relationship with my son and daughter-in-law was not easy. After Dorothy's death, they'd been coming over more often, caring, but I sensed something insincere in their concern. Sabrina was always interested in my financial affairs. "Papa Roland, you haven't thought about investing your savings in something profitable, have you?" she asked. "The money from the sale of the print shop is in the bank. That's a lot of money for a town like Mooresville. I'm not a spender or a cheapskate, but I'm used to living within my means. Since my wife died, I've been spending even less." That evening, sitting in the chair in front of the TV, I kept thinking about that beauty parlor. Was it a coincidence or was it more than that? There aren't many people in Mooresville who can afford to rent a building downtown and invest serious money in renovations. And if this is really Sabrina realizing her dream, where will they get the money from? Thinking about family, about trust, about what people are capable of doing for money occupied all my thoughts. I hope my suspicions are unfounded. I hope Kevin and Sabrina never do anything that would ruin our relationship permanently. The next day, as I brewed my morning coffee, I was still thinking about Frank's words about the beauty parlor. My thoughts inevitably returned to Kevin and Sabrina, to how our relationship had evolved over those 12 years. Memory is a strange thing. Sometimes it brings events to light as if they happened yesterday, and sometimes it erases entire periods of life without a trace. Kevin was the only child Dorothy and I managed to have after several miscarriages. My wife and I had just about resigned ourselves to childlessness when at the age of 32, she was finally able to carry a baby boy. Maybe that's why we spoiled him too much. Dorothy especially, she was very fond of him, forgiving any misdemeanor, justifying every failure. Kevin was average in school, not a double, but not an excellent student either. A solid C in most subjects. Teachers complained about his inattention, disorganization, inability to finish things. He would start doing something with enthusiasm, but after a week he would drop it and switch to another. In the 10th grade, he became interested in photography, bought him an expensive camera. For 3 months, he clicked everything, and then the camera was dusty in the closet. Then there was a guitar, on which they spent a lot of money, but he never bothered to learn to play. After high school, Kevin went to a local college to major in logistics management, not because it was his vocation, but simply because the competition was small and the profession seemed promising. He studied in the same way as at school, without much enthusiasm, but also without failures. I got a diploma and got a job at TransConnect as an ordinary employee. For 15 years, he reached the position of a middle manager, and his career growth stopped there. Dorothy always made excuses for him. "Roland, not everyone is born to be a leader," she said. "Kevin is kind, decent, doesn't drink, doesn't fight, doesn't get involved with shady companies. Isn't that enough? Not everyone has to be a mountain climber." I realized that my wife was right, but sometimes I wanted to see more determination in my son, more desire to achieve something in life. When I was his age, I was already running a printing company, expanding my business, thinking about the future. Kevin, on the other hand, seemed to be adrift, content with what he had, not striving for more. Sabrina came into his life when he was 28. They had met at a barber shop where Kevin had gone to get a haircut before a company party. She'd been working there as a stylist for several years, 2 years younger than him, energetic, bright, ambitious, the complete opposite of my quiet and somewhat passive son. Sabrina grew up in a broken home. Her father left when she was 8. Her mother worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. After school, she entered a beauty school, got a specialty of hairdresser stylist, and started working right after graduation. A determined girl with clear plans for the future. Unlike Kevin, she knew exactly what she wanted from life. They dated for about a year before Kevin brought her to meet his parents. I remember that night very well. Sabrina showed up in an elegant black dress, high-heeled shoes, perfect hair and makeup. A beautiful woman, no doubt about it. But from the first minutes of acquaintance, I felt in her some tension, a desire to impress at any cost. At dinner, she talked a lot about her work, her plans for the future, about her clients, about how important it is for women to feel beautiful. "You know, Mr. Barrington," she said to me, "the beauty industry is booming. Women are willing to spend more and more money on themselves. A properly run salon can make a very good profit." Dorothy liked Sabrina immediately. His wife always wanted Kevin to find a life partner, and she was genuinely happy for his happiness. "Roland, look at the way she looks at him," she whispered to me in the kitchen while we were making dessert. "You can see that she loves him. And what a beauty. And smart, businesslike." Kevin was lucky. I wasn't so sure of the sincerity of Sabrina's feelings, but I tried not to show my doubts. After all, my son was a grown man and had the right to make his own choices. Besides, Dorothy was right. Sabrina did give the impression of an intelligent and energetic woman. Maybe she was just what Kevin needed to shake things up and start building his career more actively. The wedding was modest. 40 guests in the restaurant, Golden Spike on the edge of the city. The young rented a small apartment in a new neighborhood, furnished it on credit, lived like most young couples, from paycheck to paycheck, dreaming of their own home, children, a better future. During the first years of their marriage, their relationship was normal. Sabrina began to come to visit us more often, helped Dorothy in the household, participated in family holidays. But I noticed that she was scrutinizing our house, interested in the value of furniture, antique things that my wife and I had collected over the years. "What a beautiful set," she said, looking at the porcelain plates in the cupboard. "Must be very expensive. And this carpet, is it Persian? It must be worth a fortune nowadays." Dorothy paid no attention to these remarks, and I tried to ignore them. After all, a young woman has a right to be interested in beautiful things. But as time went on, I noticed that Sabrina was showing an unhealthy curiosity about our financial affairs. 3 years after their marriage, they bought a house in a new cottage community on the outskirts of Mooresville. Small but modern, with 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a 2-car garage. They took out a 25-year mortgage at 10% interest. Sabrina was thrilled to finally have her own place, to be able to customize it to her liking, to be able to expand the house or sell it for a profit someday. Kevin was more reserved about the purchase. "Dad, to be honest, I'm not sure we can make the payments," he confided to me one day. "The mortgage takes more than half of our income. If something happens to one of us with a job, there will be trouble." "Then why did you buy it?" I asked. Sabrina really wanted it. She said renting was a waste of money, that it's better to pay for your own place than for someone else's. It makes sense. Logical, but not really. All my life I have adhered to a simple rule. Do not spend more than you earn, and do not take on what you cannot pull. But young people nowadays live differently. Loans, mortgages, borrowing. It all seems like a normal way of life to them. They never had children. At first they put it off. They had to get back on their feet, pay off debts for furniture, get used to the new house. Then Sabrina said that she wanted to focus on her career, develop her professional skills, save money for her own salon. Papa Roland, she explained to me during one of her visits, "This is not the time for children. We must first provide them with a decent future, not breed poverty." Dorothy was upset about the lack of grandchildren, but she didn't dare to pressure the young. "They know when to have children," she told me. "It is not our business to interfere with their plans." After her wife's death, the relationship with Kevin and Sabrina changed. They began to visit more often, more attentive to my health, my well-being, my domestic problems. Sabrina took on the role of a caring daughter-in-law, bringing prepared lunches, keeping the house clean, reminding me about doctor's appointments. But gradually I began to notice that this care was of a calculated nature. Sabrina talked about my finances too often, inquiring about my bank accounts, my pension, the value of my house. "Papa Roland, you realize we need to know about your affairs so we can help you if necessary," she said. "What if something happens? How are we going to sort through the paperwork if we don't know where everything is?" It makes sense. The son should be aware of his father's affairs. But I was confused by the tone of these conversations. Too insistent interest in specific figures, the desire to gain access to bank documents. "Maybe you could get Kevin a power of attorney," Sabrina suggested. "It would be more convenient for everyone. He could help you with financial matters, and you wouldn't have to go to the bank every time for small things." I declined, saying that I could handle my own affairs for the time being. Sabrina didn't insist, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. And a few months ago, she brought up the subject of the will. "Papa Roland, I'm sorry for the delicate subject, but you realize that sooner or later, it will have to be decided. It's better to do it beforehand, while you're still in your right mind, than to have your relatives go through the courts." I made a will while Dorothy was still alive, but Sabrina didn't know about it. And I was in no hurry to educate her. Something told me that information about my plans for the inheritance could radically change the behavior of my son and daughter-in-law, and I wanted to observe their true motives for some time to come. Sabrina's attitude toward the house I lived in was particularly alarming to me. She often made remarks about its size, its layout, its potential value. "Such a big house for one person," she sighed. "And the lot is huge. In the center of town, real estate like this is very expensive. Maybe you should think about selling and moving to a smaller apartment. It would be a good investment, and it would be easier for you to take care of the place." Kevin was usually silent during these conversations, but I could see that he didn't object to my wife's plans. My son had never had a strong character, In all his life he had preferred to go with the flow, to avoid conflict, to agree with more strong-willed people. At school he was bullied by classmates and he did not fight back. At work, his bosses burden him with extra duties without extra pay, and he doesn't protest. Sabrina makes most of the decisions in their family, and he obediently follows her instructions. Not an evil man, my son. Kind, gentle, willing to help those in need. But irresponsible, not independent, unable to make serious decisions. All his life, he's had someone else making decisions for him. First Dorothy and me, now Sabrina. And that worries me, especially when it comes to serious things like family finances and inheritance. Sabrina, on the other hand, always knows exactly what she wants. Ambitious, determined, ready to go after what she wants by any means necessary, but at the same time short-sighted, unable to calculate the consequences of their actions several steps ahead. It seems to her that if she wants something very much, she has the right to claim it, and obstacles on the way to the goal perceives as a temporary inconvenience that can be bypassed or overcome. In recent months, she has become particularly active in discussing plans to open a beauty salon, brought printouts of business plans from the internet, showed photos of successful establishments in other cities, told about acquaintances who got rich in the beauty industry. Papa Roland, you realize that this is not just a whim, but a serious investment in the future, she convinced me. A beauty salon in a good location pays for itself in 2 or 3 years, and then brings stable profits for decades. Maybe she's right. Maybe a beauty parlor really is a good idea for Mooresville. But I'm confused by her certainty that I should fund the project, as if my money is a shared family resource that she has the right to manage equally with me. As I sat in my armchair in the evening, sipping tea, I reflected on how people have changed over the past decades. In my time, there were clear boundaries between generations, between one's own and others' money, between dreams and reality. Now those boundaries have been erased. Young people think that they're entitled to everything at once, that their parents are obliged to provide for them until they die. Maybe I'm too hard on them. Maybe I should trust my son and daughter-in-law more, believe in the sincerity of their intentions. But something inside tells me to be careful. Not everything is as simple as it seems at first glance. On Tuesday, at about 11:30 in the morning, the phone rang. I was just sorting through the mail. Bills, advertisements, pension notices. The usual routine that fills an older person's days. Glancing at the caller ID, I saw the name First National Bank of Mooresville. Odd. Usually they only call for serious reasons. Card problems, suspicious transactions, important changes in banking policy. Hello, Mr. Barrington? A pleasant female voice with a slight southern accent. This is Jessica Hamilton from Security at First National Bank. How are you, sir? Hello, Jessica. I'm fine, thank you. What's up? Mr. Barrington, I'm calling about a transaction in your deposit account number 4821. A large withdrawal was made at 9:15 this morning. According to our security policy, we are required to contact the account holder to confirm all transactions over $50,000. My heart jumped. Deposit account 4821 is one of my main accounts, where the money from the sale of the print shop is deposited. I had not authorized anyone to withdraw money from it. In fact, the account is authorized only in the event of death or incapacity. How much was withdrawn? My voice seemed to waver. $430,000, sir. The transaction was made under a power of attorney signed by you on March 8, 2019. The trustee is your son, Kevin Roland Barrington. The world shook around me. $430,000, more than half of my entire savings. A power of attorney dated March 8, 1921. I remember it well. I executed it after Dorothy's death at the urging of Wilson Crowder, the family lawyer. Roland, he said at the time, at your age, it's wise to have a trustee in case of illness or other unforeseen circumstances. If something happens, Kevin can handle the accounts without waiting for court orders. The power of attorney was for emergencies. If I went into the hospital, lost capacity, couldn't make decisions for myself. There was no question of using my money for personal use. Kevin knew that. We discussed this document when he signed it. I clearly explained to him the purpose of the power of attorney. Mr. Barrington? Jessica restlessly interjected. Sir, are you there? Yes, I'm here. Jessica, I did not authorize this transaction. The withdrawal occurred without my knowledge or consent. Pause. You can hear her typing on the keyboard. Sir, according to our records, the power of attorney is valid and unrevoked. Your son has presented all the necessary proof of identity. The transaction was made in accordance with banking procedures. But I am alive, well, and legally capable. My voice has risen. A power of attorney should only be used in emergencies when I cannot handle the accounts myself. Mr. Barrington, I understand your concern. Unfortunately, the bank cannot interpret the terms of use of a power of attorney. If the document is valid and does not contain any special restrictions, the trustee is authorized to make transactions within the scope of the authority granted. My hands trembled. $430,000. That's how much I need to rent and renovate the building downtown, buy equipment for the beauty salon, and pay for the expensive materials Frank told me about. It all adds up to a horrifying picture of betrayal. What do I do? Can I cancel the surgery? Sir, if you believe that the power of attorney has been misused, I recommend that you contact a lawyer and the police immediately. The bank can block the remaining accounts on your application to prevent further unauthorized transactions. Yes, block all my accounts right now. Don't let anyone make any withdrawals without my personal presence. Yes, sir, I'll have the lockdown in place within the hour. I also recommend that you come to the bank as soon as possible with your identification documents to officially revoke the power of attorney. After talking to the bank, I sat in my chair for a long time trying to comprehend what had happened. My own son had robbed me, used a power of attorney that was meant to protect my interests to steal almost half of my fortune, and he'd done it in secret, hoping I wouldn't find out about the theft until the beauty parlor opened and started turning a profit. My hands were still shaking when I dialed Kevin's number. Long beeps, answering machine. Hi, this is Kevin. Leave a message after the beep. Short beeps. Kevin, it's Dad. Call me back immediately. We need to talk right away. I hung up and immediately dialed again. Got the machine again and again. The fourth time the phone didn't answer. Kevin must have turned it off. I tried Sabrina, her work phone number at the beauty parlor. Beauty and Style Salon. This is Sabrina, she said in her usual cheerful voice. Sabrina, it's Papa Roland. I need to speak to Kevin urgently. Pause. You can hear her covering the receiver with her palm and whispering with someone. Daddy Roland, Kevin's at work right now. He has an important client meeting. Why don't you call me back tonight? It can't wait till tonight. Tell him to contact me immediately. It's about the bank account. Another pause, longer. Okay, I'll tell him. He'll be sure to call back as soon as he's free. But Kevin didn't call back an hour or two later. I dialed his number again, and the phone still didn't answer. Sabrina hadn't picked up either. It became clear that they were avoiding the conversation, hoping to buy time. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I drove to the bank. Jessica Hamilton was a pleasant woman of about 45, with sympathetic eyes and a professional demeanor. She took me to a separate office, offered me coffee, and showed me all the transaction documents. Mr. Barrington, I have to tell you that technically your son did not violate banking rules, she explained, flipping through the papers. The power of attorney is properly executed, notarized, contains all the necessary details. There are no restrictions on amounts or conditions of use. But he knew that this power of attorney was for emergencies. Unfortunately, the bank cannot take into account verbal agreements between relatives. We are only guided by written documents. If you want to make a claim against your son, that's a matter for law enforcement or civil court. It took me over an hour to review the documents. Kevin's signature on all the paperwork, bank stamp, transaction time of 9 hours and 15 minutes in the morning. So he went to the bank right after it opened to get the money before I got the call from security. It's all premeditated, pre-planned. Where was the money transferred to? I asked Jessica. To the corporate account of Elbury Interiors, a company that builds and renovates commercial premises. Judging by the destination of the payment, it's a prepayment for renovation work. Elbury Interiors. Never heard of that company in Mooresville. So they hired out-of-town contractors to hide their connection to the Barrington family. Further evidence that the theft was planned with care and deliberation. I came home in a state of near shock. $430,000, more than half of all my savings, accumulated over decades of hard work. Money that should have provided me with a peaceful old age and left to my son as an inheritance, stolen by my own child to fulfill his wife's ambitions. I tried to understand the logic behind their act. Maybe they planned to return the money when the salon started to turn a profit. Maybe they thought I wouldn't find out about the theft until I was dead. Or were they hoping that I would just accept the fact and not ruin my relationship with my only son? But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. They were not going to return the money. The plan was simple: steal the funds to start a business, and then present the case as if I gave them the money as a loan or a gift for the development of the family business. Who would believe an old man who doesn't remember such a generous gift? Who would deal with family financial matters? In the evening, around 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I looked out the window and saw Kevin's car in the driveway. My heart raced. Finally, we could talk face to face, get the truth. Kevin walked into the house with a guilty look, avoiding looking me in the eye. Sabrina stayed in the car. Apparently, she didn't want to be involved in an unpleasant scene. My son walked into the living room, sat on the edge of the couch, nervously rubbing his belt with his hands. "Dad, I know you got a call from the bank," he began in a quiet voice. "I can explain everything." "Explain," I said briefly. "Explain how my son became a thief." Kevin flinched at the word. "Dad, come on, what kind of thief?" "I didn't steal the money, I borrowed it. It's a temporary loan. We'll pay it back with interest as soon as the salon is up and running." "A loan?" I couldn't believe such insolence. "You stole $430,000 without my permission, and you call it a loan?" "Dad, you gotta understand. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. A building like this downtown may never come up for lease again. The landlord wanted the whole thing. A year's rent, security deposit, prepayment to the contractors. We didn't have time for a long negotiation. So you've been planning this for a long time? How long have you been planning to steal from me?" "Not steal from me." Kevin raised his voice, looking me in the eye for the first time all night. "We planned to ask you for a loan, but we knew you'd say no. You always say no when it comes to serious money. This is an opportunity." "I say no when I see people living beyond their means," I said slowly. "You and your wife are in debt up to your eyeballs. Mortgages, loans, credit cards, and now you want to go even deeper with my money. Dad, a beauty parlor is not Sabrina's whim. It's a serious business that can make a good profit. We researched the market, we made a business plan, we consulted experts." "What experts? Who did you consult when you were planning to rob your own father?" Kevin fell silent, realizing he had no excuse. We sat in silence for a few minutes, looking at each other. The son with a guilty yet stubborn expression on his face, the father with pain and disappointment in his heart. "Dad," Kevin finally said quietly, "I realize what I did was wrong. But believe me, we didn't mean to deceive you. We just wanted to make something of ourselves, to make a future for ourselves. You don't have anywhere to put that money anyway." That last part really got to me. You don't have anywhere else to put that money. As if my savings were a burden I needed to get rid of. As if I, a 74-year-old man, had no right to manage the fruits of my labor on my own. "Go away," I said tiredly. "Leave and don't come back until you've paid back every penny. Papa, go away." Kevin got up, stood there for a moment, as if he wanted to add something, but changed his mind and headed for the door. Through the window, I could see him explaining something to Sabrina, her gesticulating, clearly resenting my reaction. Then the car drove away, and I was left alone with the realization that the family I had known all my life no longer existed. I woke up the next day with a clear head and a clear understanding of what needed to be done. The night was hard, tossing and turning, replaying the conversation with Kevin in my head, trying to figure out where I had gone wrong in raising my son. But by morning, the emotions had subsided and a cold calculation remained. If they decided to play unfairly, I didn't have to play by their rules. After breakfast, I got into my old Buick and drove downtown. The McDonald's building on Main Street was 3 blocks from the bank, next to the post office and the old Rialto movie theater. I parked across the street and studied the scene for a few minutes. The picture had changed dramatically since Frank had told me about the beginning of the renovation. The front of the building was covered with scaffolding. The first floor windows shone with new glass, and neat stacks of marble slabs were stacked at the entrance. 3 trucks were unloading materials: ceramic tiles, plumbing fixtures, lighting fixtures. There were 12 people working, all in identical blue coveralls with the Elbury Interiors logo. I got out of the car and approached the foreman, a sturdy man in his 50s with a gray beard and attentive eyes. He stood near the entrance, studying some blueprints and occasionally giving instructions to the workers. "Excuse me," I addressed him. "I'm a local resident. I'm interested in what will be here. Have you heard a beauty salon?" The foreman raised his head from the drawings and looked at me appraisingly. "Yes, a premium class beauty salon. Big project, 3 floors, complete reconstruction. It will be one of the most modern establishments in the region." "Impressive," I said, trying to keep a friendly tone. "Who's the client? One of the local businessmen?" "A couple, the Barringtons. Young, ambitious, know what they want. Wife's going to run the salon. She's got a lot of experience in the beauty industry." Hearing my own name in that context was painful. So they're using my name to do business. They must have introduced themselves to the landlord and contractors as a wealthy family with a solid financial guarantee, thanks to their elderly typographer father. "And when is it scheduled to open?" I continued my inquiries. "We are working on an accelerated schedule. Customers are in a hurry, ready to pay extra for overtime. If everything goes according to plan, in a month we will finish the main works. Then another week to install equipment, decor, and prepare for the opening. We should be up and running in early December. That's a month or so before we open. So they're planning a gala event, inviting customers, an advertising campaign. They imagine they're successful entrepreneurs who've created a modern business on their own. And no one will know that the salon was built on money stolen from an elderly father." "It turns out to be large scale," I said, looking around the construction site. "Such repairs must be expensive." The foreman grinned. "Well, the Barrington family does not save money. Only imported materials, expensive equipment, design solutions. The budget of the project is about $500,000, but it's worth it. It's going to be a really beautiful place. $500,000. So they didn't have enough of the stolen $430,000? They had to add their own funds or take out loans. I wonder how they explained their ability to pay to the banks. Probably referred to the family capital, the support of a wealthy father." "And what will be on different floors?" I asked, feigning idle curiosity. "The first floor is the main salon, areas for haircuts, coloring, styling. 12 workstations, modern equipment. Second floor, spa procedures, massage, cosmetology. The third, administrative area, owner's office, restroom for the staff." The foreman was obviously proud of the project and was happy to tell the details. "Do you see those marble slabs over there? Italian Carrara marble. Each slab costs as much as a good car, and the plumbing is German, top of the line. The client is very demanding. She wants everything to be perfect." The client. "Sabrina. So she's the one in charge of the project, making decisions, communicating with contractors. Kevin, as usual, stays in the shadows, lets his wife run things. I wonder how he feels about signing documents for money stolen from his own father. Are the architectural permits, licenses, everything in order?" I asked. "Of course. Mrs. Barrington has been very thorough in her preparations. All the paperwork is correct. Permits have been obtained. Taxes have been paid. A professional approach. A professional approach to spending stolen money. They really thought of everything in advance. The legalities, the terms of reference, the timeline. The only thing they didn't take into account was the reaction of the robbed father." I thanked the foreman for the information and stepped aside to watch the work. The workers were working quickly and smoothly. Some were dismantling old partitions, others were installing new electrical wiring, and others were preparing the walls for finishing. A well-organized team, experienced craftsmen. You really should pay a lot of money for this kind of work. Money that Kevin and Sabrina stole from me. Every marble slab, every light fixture, every square meter of tile was paid for with my savings. The result of years of hard work, savings, smart housekeeping. And they spend that money as if they'd earned it themselves. Around 1 o'clock, a familiar car pulled up to the building. Kevin's dark blue Honda Accord. His son and daughter-in-law got out, both in business suits, files in hand. They looked important, self-assured, successful entrepreneurs overseeing the construction of their business. I quickly got into the car and drove away to a safe distance from where I could watch but remain unnoticed. Sabrina was gesticulating vigorously, explaining something to the foreman, pointing to blueprints, pointing to various interior details. Kevin stood beside her, nodding occasionally, but it was obvious that the initiative belonged entirely to his wife. They stayed at the construction site for about 40 minutes. Sabrina photographed the progress of the work on her phone, made notes in her notebook, negotiated with the workers. Then they got into the car and drove off in the direction of the bank. They must be solving financial issues, paying contractors extra, arranging additional services. I stayed in the car for a while, thinking about what I had seen. The picture became crystal clear. Kevin and Sabrina hadn't just stolen my money. They'd built a massive business plan around it. The beauty salon should become their main source of income, a way to rise to a new social level, to ensure financial independence. And they truly believe they are right. In their understanding, the old father simply does not understand the prospects of modern business, clinging to money, which anyway he does not need. And they, young and energetic, are able to use these funds wisely to create jobs to benefit the city. In the evening, at home, I sat down at my desk and began to draw up a plan of action. It is impossible to simply return the money. It was invested in repairs, spent on materials and work. Should I sue my own son? Theoretically possible, but long, expensive, and morally difficult. In addition, they can claim that the money was given voluntarily in the form of a family loan or gift. No, we need a different solution, a more elegant one, a fairer one. They want to play business with my money? Let them learn what real business is, with its risks, its competition, its unexpected twists and turns. The first thing I did was call an old acquaintance of mine, Wilson Crowder. Wilson has been a family lawyer for 30 years, handling the affairs of several generations of Mooresville families. He was the one who helped me draw up my will after Dorothy died, who drew up that unfortunate power of attorney for Kevin. Roland, he was glad I called. How are you? It's been a while. Wilson, there's a problem with the power of attorney we made for Kevin. He's been misusing it. Tell me more about it. I laid out the whole situation. The money theft, the beauty parlor, my son's refusal to explain his actions. Wilson listened attentively, sometimes asking clarifying questions, making notes. I see, he said at the end. Technically, Kevin did not violate the terms of the power of attorney because we did not include restrictions on its use. But in fact, it's a breach of trust, especially considering the amounts and purposes of the spending. What can be done? Several options. First, revoke the power of attorney immediately to prevent further abuse. I can do that tomorrow. Second, file a lawsuit to recover the funds. There's a chance of success, but it would be a long and public process. Are there any other options? There are. We could try to settle the matter out of court, send an official notice of demand to return the money, threaten a lawsuit. Sometimes it works better than actual litigation. We agreed to meet tomorrow morning to discuss the details. Wilson promised to prepare all the necessary documents and develop a strategy of action. The next call I made was to the bank, Jessica Hamilton. Jessica, this is Roland Barrington. Can you provide me with full details of exactly where my money was transferred to? Of course, Mr. Barrington. I have all the details of the recipient, Elbury Interiors, their bank details, contact details. I can email it to you or give it to you in person. Send it to the post office. And one more question. Can you find out if this company was previously associated with my son or daughter-in-law? Officially, no. Bank secrecy. But unofficially, I can tell you that the Elbury Interiors account was opened recently, just a month ago. And your payment is one of the first major deposits into it. That's interesting information. So, Elbury Interiors is not an old established company, but a newly formed firm. It's likely that Kevin and Sabrina specifically found a contractor who would be willing to work their way, get a large upfront payment, get the job done quickly, and ask no questions. In the evening, I made a few more calls to the city administration, to the licensing authorities, to the tax office. Everywhere I introduced myself as a concerned citizen who wanted to know details about a new business in the city center. Most officials willingly shared information. In a small town, the appearance of a large beauty salon is really an event. Gradually, a complete picture of the project was formed. The building lease was for 5 years with the right to extend it. All the permits were properly executed. Taxes were paid in advance. Sabrina is listed as the salon director, Kevin as a co-founder. The paperwork lists them as a married couple who decided to invest inherited funds in a local business. Legacy funds. So they're already planning the public version. They got money from their generous father who supported their entrepreneurial endeavors. And if I try to refute this version, they will present the case as if the old man simply forgot about his gift or regretted it after the fact. But they have one problem that they don't realize yet. I know the truth. I remember every penny of my money and every circumstance of its transfer. And I have time to prepare for when they announce the grand opening of the salon. As I made my plan for tomorrow, I felt a strange calmness. For the first time in days, the pain of betrayal receded, giving way to cold determination. Kevin and Sabrina want to play big business? They'll get a game they never expected. But the rules will be set not by a greedy daughter-in-law or a gutless son, but by a man who has built his business with honest labor and knows the value of every dollar. In the morning, I met Wilson Crowder at his office on Church Street. The law office was housed in an old 19th century mansion that smelled of leather bindings and expensive tobacco. Wilson received me in his office, which was filled with files and legal reference books. Outside the window, I could see the tops of maple trees, their leaves almost completely fallen after the recent frost. "Roland, I've been thinking about your situation all night," said the lawyer, pouring coffee from an antique silver set. "It's a delicate case, but it's solvable. The key is to get the strategy right." Wilson laid out several documents on the table: a copy of the power of attorney, bank statements, certificates from the city administration about the registration of the beauty salon. All this information he had gathered in one morning using his professional connections. "Technically, your son has not committed a crime," explained the lawyer, pointing to the text of the power of attorney. "The document gives him the right to dispose of the accounts without restrictions. But there is a concept of breach of trust, especially when it comes to large sums of money in family relationships." "What exactly can be done?" I asked, studying the papers. "There are several options. The first is to revoke the power of attorney immediately and demand the return of the funds through the court. Long, expensive, public, but the chances of success are high. The second is to try to settle out of court by threatening legal action. The third is a more subtle approach." "What kind of approach?" Wilson smiled with the slyness of an experienced lawyer. "If they open a salon with your money, then in fact you become an unwitting investor in the business. You can demand a share in the enterprise proportional to the money you invested, essentially make you a part owner of the salon." That idea sounded interesting to me. "Kevin and Sabrina want to be entrepreneurs at my expense? Let them get a real business partner with all that entails." "Is that really feasible?" "Absolutely. We have documentary proof of the source of the funding, bank transfers, evidence that the money was used specifically for the salon. We can prepare a statement of claim to recognize you as a co-owner of the business." "And the fourth option?" I asked, feeling that Wilson is still hiding something. "The fourth is the most elegant." The lawyer leaned back in his chair. "Wait until the grand opening of the salon and publicly declare your rights to the business. With witnesses, with documents, demanding immediate settlement of the situation, the effect would be maximized." I like the idea of public exposure. Kevin and Sabrina are planning a grand opening, inviting guests, presenting themselves as successful entrepreneurs. And then the robbed father shows up with documents proving that their entire business was built on theft. "But it won't hurt my reputation." "On the contrary," Wilson assured me, "you'll look like a victim of family fraud who fights for justice. Public opinion will be on your side, especially if you present the case in the right way." We discussed the details of each option, weighed the pros and cons of different approaches. In the end, I chose a combined strategy: prepare all the documents for the court, but first try to resolve the issue publicly during the opening of the salon. If Kevin and Sabrina agree to an amicable settlement, good. If they don't, we go to court. "It'll take me a few days to get all the paperwork ready," Wilson said. "A statement of claim, a claim for co-ownership, a damage calculation with interest. In the meantime, find out the exact date the salon will open." From the law office, I went to the bank to Jessica Hamilton. She's already prepared a full set of documents on the theft. bank statements, copies of transfers, information on the recipient of the funds, all neatly filed, sealed, ready for court. Mr. Barrington, Jessica said, handing me the folder. I also contacted Elbury Interiors. Technically, they can't disclose client information, but unofficially, they've confirmed that they're doing a major renovation job on a beauty salon in downtown Mooresville. But what about themselves? How long has this company been in existence? Registered 2 months ago in a neighboring state. Minimal capital stock, no office, just a P.O. box. It's a typical fly-by-night firm for one-off projects. The picture was getting clearer and clearer. Kevin and Sabrina found a contractor who agreed to work on their terms, get a large upfront cash payment, get the job done quickly, no questions asked about the origin of the money. Once the project was completed, Elbury Interiors would probably disappear, leaving minimal trace. Jessica, can you freeze all transactions on this transfer? Seize the funds? Unfortunately, the money's already been spent, but I can send a formal request to the recipient's bank for an itemization of all transactions. This will help to prove that the funds were really used to repair the salon. After the bank, I stopped by Frank Milton's. The neighbor was just hosing down the lawn and was happy to be distracted by the conversation. Roland, how's it going? Did you hear the news about the beauty parlor? What new? I asked, feigning interest. So big. I passed by yesterday, so there is already half of the first floor is decorated with marble. The beauty is indescribable. And the equipment they're bringing in, chairs like in a spaceship, dryers the size of refrigerators. They're not saving any money. When do they plan to open? I hear it's the first weekend in December. They're going to organize a big celebration, invite all the important people of the city, the mayor, deputies, businessmen. They've already booked ads in the paper and on the radio. The first weekend in December is the 7th and 8th, so I have about 3 weeks to prepare. Enough time to collect all the necessary documents, to think through a plan of action, to prepare morally for a confrontation with my son and daughter-in-law. Who are the owners of the salon? I continued my inquiries. A young couple, last name Barrington. Husband works in logistics. Wife's a hairdresser. They say they're very ambitious, want to make Mooresville the beauty center of the region. Frank obviously didn't know I was related to the salon owners. I wonder how many people in town know the truth about the financing of the project? Surely Kevin and Sabrina must be spreading the version of family support, that their elderly father helped them start the business. At home, I sat down at my computer and started gathering information about beauty salons as a business. It turned out that the industry is really profitable, but requires serious initial investment and professional management. The average salon pays for itself in 2 to 3 years, provided the correct organization of work and a constant flow of customers. I studied the price lists of competitors, analyzed the market of cosmetic services in Mooresville and neighboring cities, estimated the potential profitability of the enterprise. In an optimistic scenario, the salon could bring up to $100,000 of net profit per year. Not bad for a small town, but all these calculations were based on the assumption that the business will be managed by professionals. And what if the owners do not cope with the administrative tasks? What if they overestimated the demand for expensive cosmetic services in Mooresville? What if competitors start a dumping war? That evening, I called my old acquaintance, Gerald Roten. Gerald owns a chain of 3 beauty salons in neighboring towns, a man with 30 years of experience in the industry. We've known each other since high school. We're friends. We meet at our class graduation parties. Roland! He was happy to get the call. I haven't heard your voice in a long time. How are you? Gerald, I have a delicate request. Can you advise me on the beauty business? Sure. You've decided to change careers? He laughed. Not exactly. My son and his wife are opening a salon in Mooresville. I'd like to understand their business prospects. I told Gerald the general concept of the salon: 3 floors, premium segment, Italian materials, German equipment. The budget of the project is about $500,000. Plans to attract clients from all over the region. Ambitious, Gerald said thoughtfully. But there are a few problems. First, the premium segment in a small town is a risk. There may not be enough customers to recoup such an investment. Secondly, competition. If the project is successful, others will quickly copy the concept. And what about management? I asked. Sabrina has been a hairdresser for 12 years. but she's never run a big business. That's the main problem, Gerald confirmed. Being a good craftsman and being a good administrator are different things. Running a salon requires knowledge of finance, marketing, human resources, purchasing. If your daughter-in-law doesn't have experience in these areas, there could be serious difficulties. After talking to Gerald, I made a list of potential risks to Sabrina's salon. Overestimation of demand, inexperience in management, high operating costs, competition, difficulty in staffing, and dependence on the economic situation in the region. Any of these factors could have led to losses or even bankruptcy. But I was not only interested in business risks, I was thinking about how to behave properly with my son and daughter-in-law. They betrayed my trust, stole a significant part of my savings, and planned to build their prosperity on deceit. On the one hand, I want to punish them, to show them the consequences of dishonest behavior. On the other hand, Kevin is my only son, my last close relative. Dorothy, if she were alive, would probably ask me to forgive Kevin, to give him a chance to improve. My wife had always believed in her son's goodness, that his actions were due to weakness of character, not malice. Roland, she said during her lifetime, Kevin is not an evil man. He just sometimes makes bad decisions under the influence of circumstances. But now the circumstances were not fate, but Sabrina's greed and calculation. She convinced her husband to steal money from his father, worked out a plan to use these funds, organized the whole operation. Kevin only signed the documents and took the money from the bank, the executor, not the organizer of the crime. Reflecting on the family relationship, I realized that simple forgiveness wouldn't work here. If I kept silent, pretended that nothing had happened, Sabrina would realize that I wasn't to be trifled with. Next time, she could encroach on the house, on the rest of my savings, on any possession that seems useful to her. No, I need a lesson. Hard, visual, memorable. They wanted to be businessmen at my expense? Let them learn what real business is, with all its complexities, risks, unexpected twists and turns. Let them realize that other people's money never brings happiness to its owners. Late in the evening, before going to bed, I went over all the material I had collected one more time. Bank documents, legal opinions, information about the salon, contacts of witnesses. I have everything I need to prove my case and protect my interests. All that's left is to wait for the grand opening of the salon and choose the right moment for the decisive conversation. Kevin and Sabrina are planning a party. They want to show the whole town their success. Enjoy the fruits of others' labor. What they don't know is that their main investor is preparing to give them a surprise they will remember for the rest of their lives. The 7th of December was clear and cold. I woke up early, around 6 in the morning, even though the grand opening of the salon was not until 7 in the evening. The whole day was to be spent waiting, and I decided to make the most of it, to check all the documents once again, to make sure that the plan of action had been thought out to the last detail. After breakfast, I reread the statement of claim that Wilson Crowder had prepared, a clear, legally competent document on 7 pages, which detailed the circumstances of the theft of money, presented evidence of illegal use of power of attorney, formulated the requirements for the return of funds, and the recognition of me as a co-owner of the salon. The lawyer had done a good job. There was no quibble with the text. At 10:30, I got a call from Jessica Hamilton at the bank. Serenity, Mr. Barrington, I received a reply to our inquiry about the movement of funds on the account of Elbury Interiors. The information confirms that your money was used solely to pay for renovations to the Main Street building. Thank you, Jessica. That's important information for the case. I'd also like to inform you that yesterday, your son tried to get information about the blocked accounts. Of course, we didn't tell him, citing bank secrecy, but he seemed worried. So Kevin realizes I'm taking action. He must have told Sabrina about the visit to the bank, and they're guessing that today's opening might not go as smoothly as planned. Good. Chuckles. Let them be nervous. At lunchtime, I drove downtown to see the final preparations for the grand event. The salon building had been transformed beyond recognition. The facade shone with new plaster and fresh paint. Large windows reflected the sunlight. Above the entrance was a graceful sign, Beauty Salon Elegance. In front of the building, workers were installing a red carpet and stands with ribbons for the ceremonial cutting. Around 3 o'clock, cars with flowers, balloons, and festive decorations pulled up to the salon. Sabrina, in an elegant business suit, supervised the decorating process, indicating where to place the bouquets, how to hang the garlands, where to place the buffet table. She looked enthusiastic and happy. Her biggest dream was finally coming true. Kevin was pushing a cart with boxes from the catering company. Appetizers, drinks, disposable dishes, napkins. Everything for the reception. My son seemed content too, though occasionally I noticed a shadow of worry on his face. Apparently, the thought of the possible consequences of stealing the money still worried him. Around 5 p.m., the first guests began to arrive. I recognized several local businessmen, city officials, and journalists from the Mooresville Daily. The women dressed smartly, the men in business suits, a typical crowd for a small-town presentation of a new business. At 6:30, I met Wilson Crowder in his car parked 2 blocks from the saloon. The lawyer had brought along an assistant, a young lawyer named Todd McIntyre, who was to capture everything on camera for a possible lawsuit. "Roland, are you ready?" "Akram," Wilson asked, handing me a folder of documents. "Remember, the main thing is to stay calm. No emotions, just facts. You have every right to demand an explanation for your money." "Ready," I replied, checking the contents of the folder. "What if they refuse to talk in front of witnesses? Then we'll just make the case public. You have all the evidence. Bank statements, transfer documents, city records. There's no point in denying it." Todd set up a video camera and a recorder. "Mr. Barrington, I'll be recording the entire conversation with your family. It'll be helpful in the event of a lawsuit, but be sure to speak clearly and loudly." At 7 p.m., the area in front of the saloon was filled with guests. 70 people, maybe more. Sabrina gave a welcome speech, talked about the concept of the salon, and thanked everyone who had helped with the project. She mentioned the support of her family, her husband's understanding, her faith in the success of the endeavor. Not a word about where the money for such an expensive renovation came from. Then Kevin took the floor. He talked about the importance of small business development, job creation, and how nice it was to see the downtown transformed. My son looked excited but pleased. It was probably the first time in his life that he felt like a significant figure, a successful entrepreneur. When the speeches were over, the guests broke into groups and began to look around the salon, tasting the treats, discussing what they had seen. The atmosphere was festive. People sincerely admired the result of the renovation. Indeed, the salon turned out to be impressive, expensive, stylish, modern. I waited another 10 minutes to give the guests a chance to relax, and then together with Wilson and Todd, I headed for the entrance to the salon. A few people recognized me. In a small town, faces are out in plain sight, especially if you've owned a notable business for years. "Roland Barrington!" exclaimed the mayor of the town, Harold Fincher, shaking my hand. "What a pleasant surprise. I didn't know you were coming to the opening of the salon." "I have a reason for attending this event," I said, trying to speak loud enough for those around me to hear. "I need to talk to the owners of the salon about a business matter." The mayor looked intrigued, but didn't ask for details. Meanwhile, one of the guests had already informed Kevin and Sabrina of my arrival. They were standing at the buffet table, whispering about something, occasionally glancing in my direction. I approached them, holding a file folder in my hand. Wilson and Todd walked beside me, attracting the attention of the guests. The conversations gradually died down. People sensed the tension and waited for events to unfold. "Kevin, Sabrina," I said in a calm voice, "I need to talk to you. It's about the financing of this salon." Sabrina was the first to come to her senses after a moment's stupor. "Papa Roland, what a pleasant surprise. We didn't expect to see you. Come in, help yourself, and see what we've done." "I've already seen it," I replied. "Very impressive, especially considering that it was all built with my money." There was silence. The guests stopped talking and turned to look at us. Kevin paled, Sabrina tensed, but tried to keep a smile on her face. "Dad, what are you talking about?" My son tried to intervene. "Let's discuss this at home, as a family." "No," I said firmly. "Let's discuss it here and now, in front of witnesses. Kevin, you used a power of attorney to steal $430,000 from my bank account. That money was used to renovate and equip the salon we're in now." Several of the women gasped. The men looked at each other in bewilderment. A journalist from the local newspaper took out a notebook and began to take notes. The atmosphere of celebration instantly evaporated. "Papa Roland, you're wrong. Sabrina tried to save the situation. Kevin didn't steal the money. You gave it to us as a loan for the development of the family business. Remember our conversation a month ago? There was no conversation, I said, and I didn't give you a loan. Wilson, show me the documents. The lawyer opened a folder and took out bank statements. This records all transactions in Mr. Barrington's account. On November 7th, at 9 hours and 15 minutes, his son withdrew $430,000 without the permission of the account holder. The money was transferred to Elbury Interiors to pay for the renovation of this building. The crowd of guests drew tighter around us. People were looking over each other's shoulders, whispering, speculating. Kevin and Sabrina were at the center of a scandal that was ruining all their plans. It's a family misunderstanding, one of Sabrina's friends tried to intervene. There was no need to make a big deal out of it. The theft of $430,000 is not a family misunderstanding, Wilson objected. It's a serious crime regardless of family ties. We'll get it all back, Kevin shouted. Dad will pay it back with interest as soon as the salon is profitable. When exactly? I asked. A year from now? In 2 years? 10 years from now? What if the salon goes bankrupt? What if you fail to manage the business? Sabrina could no longer keep her composure. Roland, what are you doing? You're ruining your own son's future. This is our chance to rise up, to create something meaningful. At my expense, I replied harshly. Without my permission, fraudulently. You stole my savings and now you want me to keep quiet for your convenience. The mayor of the city came closer, clearly trying to understand the essence of the conflict. The reporter continued to record every word. Todd filmed everything on his camera. The scandal was going public, just as I'd planned. Dad, Kevin said in a pleading tone, please, let's talk in private. I'll explain everything, and we'll find a solution that works for everyone. The explanation should have been given a month ago when you stole the money, I said. Now it's too late for family negotiations. Wilson pulled out another document. Mr. Barrington demands to be recognized as a co-owner of the salon in proportion to the money invested, or a full refund of the stolen money within 30 days. Otherwise, the case will be taken to court. Co-owner? Sabrina couldn't believe her ears. You want to take our business away from us? I want my money back, I replied. Either in cash or in the form of a share in the enterprise that was built with my money. That's fair. The festivities finally turned into a public scandal. The guests began to leave, many looking at me sympathetically, some shaking their heads at Kevin and Sabrina. The salon's grand opening was hopelessly ruined. Mashwananam, we'll think about your offer, Sabrina said in a squeezed voice. But this is not the moment or the place for that kind of talk. On the contrary, Wilson argued, this is exactly the right place to tell the truth. Here the stolen money has been spent. Here justice must be done. The last guests hurried out of the salon. Only we, a few of Kevin and Sabrina's close friends, a journalist, and a couple of other curious people remained. The party was over before it had even begun. When the last curious guests left the salon, only a handful of people remained in the room. Kevin and Sabrina stood near the buffet table, as if unsure of what to do next. Their faces expressed a mixture of confusion, anger, and fear. A gala evening that was supposed to be a triumph of their entrepreneurial ambitions had turned into a public humiliation. Wilson Crowder methodically laid out documents on one of the tables, turning the festive space into a makeshift office for business negotiations. Todd McIntyre kept filming the proceedings, capturing every movement, every word. A reporter from the Mooresville Daily sat in the corner and wrote down the details of the scandal in his notebook. Dad, Kevin finally broke the silence, can we at least have a private conversation? This is a family matter. It was family until you stole my money, I said, sitting down at the table across from them. Now it's a criminal case, and witnesses are essential. Sabrina clenched her fists, trying to keep her emotions in check. Roland, do you realize what you're doing? You're destroying our life's dream. We have invested not only your money in this project, but also our strength, time, hopes. My money stolen without authorization, I clarified, and your efforts and time do not give the right to steal. Wilson raised his head from the documents. Let's analyze the situation in order. On November 7th, 2024, at 9:15 in the morning, Kevin Roland Barrington used a power of attorney to withdraw $430,000 from his father's account. This transaction was made without the consent of the account holder. The attorney showed the bank statements. It records the time of the transaction, the signature of the recipient, and the purpose of the payment. The money was transferred to Elbury Interiors with the wording prepayment for renovation work. There is no mention of a family loan or gift in the documents. The power of attorney was for emergencies, I exclaimed, stopping Kevin from making excuses. In case of illness, hospitalization, incapacity, not to finance your wife's business projects. Kevin lowered his head, unable to meet my gaze. Dad, I realized what I did was wrong, but we were confident that the salon would pay for itself quickly, and we could return the money with a profit. It's an investment in our family's future. An investment implies the consent of the investor, Wilson interjected. We're dealing with embezzlement here. The law considers that to be grand fraud. Sabrina jumped up, unable to hold back any longer. Enough! Enough of this farce! Roland, you know very well that sooner or later, you would have left the money to Kevin as an inheritance anyway. We just took it a little earlier to create a stable business. A little early. I couldn't believe the audacity of it. You decided for me when to die and how to dispose of my property? We decided not to wait for nature's favor, Sabrina snapped at me. You live alone in a huge house, your money lying dead in the bank. And we are young, energetic. We can create something useful for society. Wilson shook his head. Mrs. Barrington, such reasoning is invalid. Regardless of your motives, you have embezzled someone else's money without the owner's consent. The journalist in the corner continued to write down every word. Tomorrow this story would be in the local paper, and all of Mooresville would know about the Barrington family scandal. Kevin and Sabrina's reputation as a successful businessman would be completely ruined. Dad, Kevin said in a pleading tone, tell us what you want us to do. We're willing to do whatever it takes to settle this peacefully. I pulled out another document from the folder Wilson had prepared. Here are my demands. Either you return the stolen $430,000 within 30 days, or I become a co-owner of the salon with a share proportional to my investment. What share? Sabrina asked in horror. The total cost of the project is about $500,000, explained the lawyer. $430,000 is about 86% of that amount. Accordingly, Mr. Barrington is entitled to 86% of the venture. 86%? Sabrina turned pale. That means that the salon will effectively become yours, and we will become employees in a business of our own. A business built with my money, I reminded her. And if you wanted to be the owners, you should have asked permission before you went into my pocket. Kevin clutched his head. Dad, that's impossible. We can't pay back that much money in a month. We don't have that kind of money. And to work under your supervision, Sabrina would never agree to that. Then there's a third option, Wilson said, pulling out the last document. Mr. Barrington will sue for nullity and damages. In that case, the saloon could be seized and sold to cover the debt. Seized? Sabrina gasped. You want to destroy our business on the first day of its existence? I want my money back, I said firmly, and how you do it is your choice. Wilson spread some more documents on the table. Here are applications to the court, to the prosecutor's office, to the IRS. We've also prepared a motion to seize the salon's property to secure the lawsuit. If Mr. Barrington signs these papers, a formal investigation will begin tomorrow morning. Todd continued to film what was happening, not missing a single detail of the confrontation. The camera captured Kevin's confusion, Sabrina's rage, my intransigence, the lawyer's professional coldness. All of this footage would be evidence in court if the case went to trial. Roland, Sabrina tried one last time to reason with me. Think of the family's reputation. If this story goes to court, the whole town will be talking about our problems. Do you really want that kind of publicity? The publicity started today, I said, nodding at the journalist. Tomorrow the whole story will appear in the newspaper. You ruined the family's reputation when you decided to become thieves. Kevin raised his head and looked at me with sudden anger. Thieves? Dad, you're just a greedy old man who clings to money like it's the last thing he needs. Mom was right when she said you were too stingy. Don't you dare mention your mother as an excuse for stealing, I flared up. Dorothy would never have approved of what you did. Sabra Sharam. Mom always said that a family should support each other, Kevin continued. and you've turned into an embittered cheapskate who's willing to destroy his own son for money." Wilson stood up, signaling that the negotiations were at an impasse. "Mr. Barrington, I'm afraid there's no peaceful resolution to this conflict. Your relatives are not ready for a constructive dialogue." "Not ready?" Sabrina exploded. "We've offered compromises. We are ready to return the money in installments, to give interest, to share the profits. But you want to take away our entire business. Your whole business is built on my money," I reminded her. "If you had asked for a loan honestly, we could have negotiated reasonable terms. But you chose the path of deceit." The journalist closed his notebook and headed for the exit. He had more than enough material for the article. "Tomorrow the whole of Mooresville will know that the grand opening of a new beauty parlor ended in a family scandal with accusations of grand larceny." "You have a week to think about it," Wilson said, putting the documents in a folder. "After that, Mr. Barrington will be filing lawsuits in every jurisdiction. I recommend that you take the settlement offer seriously." Kevin and Sabrina were left standing in the middle of the defeated party. The red carpet, balloons, and unfinished hors d'oeuvres all looked sad and ridiculous in the aftermath of the scandal. The dream of having their own business had turned into a nightmare that would haunt them for a long time to come. "Dad," Kevin tried to get through to me one last time, "are you really willing to ruin your only son's life for money?" "You ruined our family when you decided to steal from my father," I said, heading for the exit. "Now reap the consequences of your decisions." On the morning of December 9th, the phone rang at 7:30. I hadn't gotten out of bed yet, but my sleep was already shallow. I'd been replaying the events of the evening scandal in my head all night. Kevin's number popped up on the screen. "Dad," I heard my son's exhausted voice. "We need to meet. It's urgent. We're ready to discuss your terms." "At 8 in the morning in Wilson Crowder's office," I said briefly. "Come with business registration documents and financial statements." "Dad, why don't we do this at home, in a family setting?" "No, not without a lawyer present, and no more family talk." I skipped breakfast because I didn't have an appetite. Instead, I looked at the latest issue of the Mooresville Daily, delivered at 7:01 a.m. On the second page was an article headline, "Scandal at the Opening of a New Beauty Parlor." The reporter presented the events fairly objectively, citing my accusations of stealing money and Kevin and Sabrina's responses. The whole story looked exactly as I had planned, a family drama with a clear division between victim and perpetrators. By 8:01 a.m., I was at Wilson's office. The lawyer had already prepared new documents, draft agreements on the return of money, on the transfer of a share in the business, statements of claim to various instances. On the table were options for all occasions. "Roland," Wilson said, pouring coffee, "I think they'll agree to an amicable settlement. The scandal in the newspaper frightened them. Plus, they realize that a trial will cost more than any compromise. And if they don't, then we file lawsuits. We have ironclad evidence. We'll win the case without any problems. But it could take months, and the salon could go bankrupt in the meantime." Kevin and Sabrina showed up at 8, sharp-looking, terrible. Her son was gaunt, having lost weight overnight, his eyes red from sleeplessness. Sabrina tried to hide her fatigue under a layer of makeup, but the tremors in her hands betrayed her nervousness. They brought in a folder of papers and sat across from us with the look of condemned men. "We read the paper," Sabrina began in a shaky voice. "The whole town now knows about our problems. Customers are already calling and canceling appointments. Vendors are demanding prepayments instead of deferrals. We're on the verge of collapse before we've even started." "It's a natural consequence of stealing," I replied without sympathy. "Reputation in business is more important than money." Kevin put the registration papers for the salon on the table. "Dad, we agree to your terms. Take 86% of the business, but give us the opportunity to work, earn money, and gradually buy back the share." Wilson studied the papers he brought. "The salon is registered as a limited liability company. The authorized capital of $100,000 divided equally between the spouses, but the actual investment was almost $500,000. So, my client has the right to re-register shares in proportion to the actual investment," continued the lawyer. "86% of the shares go to Mr. Barrington, and 14% stay with you." Sabrina swallowed convulsively. 14%? Does that mean we effectively become salaried employees in our own salon? A salon built with stolen money, I clarified. And that's still a lenient punishment. I could have demanded a full confiscation of the property. But we have invested our efforts, time, experience. Sabrina tried to protest. The whole design, the layout, the concept, it's our work. Your work is valued at 14% of the value of the business, Wilson replied coldly. Considering that the fixed assets were criminally obtained, that's a fair estimate. Kevin clutched his head. Dad, can't we find a compromise? We're family. Is money more important than family? When you stole my savings, were you thinking about family relationships? I asked you. When you were planning to open the salon, did you remember that you stole from your father? We did not steal, Sabrina flared up. We borrowed money, temporarily, with the intention of paying it back. Unsolicited, secretly, fraudulently, Wilson listed. That's the classic definition of theft, regardless of your intentions. The negotiations went on for 2 hours. Kevin and Sabrina tried to bargain, asking for a reduction in my share, offering various schemes for a gradual return of the money. But I remained adamant. 86% of the business or full compensation through the court. There were no other options. Okay, Sabrina finally gave in. We agree to your terms, but with one requirement: you do not interfere in the operational activities of the salon. We continue to manage the business, make decisions on hiring, pricing, marketing. That's negotiable, I agreed. But on the condition that I get full financial control, all income and expenses go through me. No spending without my approval. Wilson began to prepare an agreement for a new division of shares in the business. Kevin and Sabrina sat in silence, realizing that their entrepreneurial dreams had been shattered by reality. They had gotten the beauty salon, but lost control of it. What about recovering the stolen money? Sabrina asked. If you become a co-owner, does that mean the debt is canceled? The debt is transformed into my share of the business, the lawyer explained. But that doesn't mean forgiveness. If the salon goes bankrupt, you will still owe the full amount personally. By 11 in the morning, the documents were ready. The agreement to re-register the shares, the new articles of incorporation, the agreement on the terms and conditions of managing the salon. Kevin and Sabrina signed the papers with the look of people signing their own verdict. There is one more question, I said, when the formalities were completed. The name of the salon. I don't like elegance. It's too flashy for an establishment built on theft. Sabrina flinched. You want to change the name? But we've already ordered advertising, signs, business cards. You'll have to order new ones, at your expense. The salon will be called Family Style. It's a more honest reflection of its origins. After we signed the paperwork, we left. Kevin and Sabrina left without saying goodbye, without even looking in my direction. They'd learned a harsh lesson about the consequences of dishonesty, but I doubted they'd internalized it. More likely, they just held a grudge and would consider me a hard-hearted old man. In the evening, I sat at home in my chair and thought about what had happened. Justice had been served. The stolen money had been returned to the owner in the form of a share in the business. Kevin and Sabrina were able to work and earn money, though under my control. Technically, everyone benefited, but the family no longer existed. Kevin would not forgive me for the public humiliation, the destruction of his entrepreneurial plans, the loss of his status as a successful businessman. Sabrina would hate me for turning her from a salon owner into a subordinate. Our relationship is ruined for good. The next day, I got a call from Frank Milton. Roland, I read in the paper about your marital problems. How's it going? Need any help? Thank you, Frank. It's all been resolved. Justice has been served. What about your relationship with your son? You're practically business partners now. Business partners, yes, I agreed. But not family. Family ended the moment they decided to steal from me. A week later, the Family Style Salon opened to the public. There weren't many customers. The scandal in the newspaper had scared away many potential customers. Sabrina worked with a somber look. Kevin rarely showed up and looked depressed. The atmosphere in the salon was tense. I began receiving weekly financial reports. Revenues were about a third of what they had been projected to be. Expenses exceeded revenues, and the prospect of a return on investment was uncertain. Maybe in a year or two, the salon would start making a profit, Or maybe it will go bankrupt even sooner. But that's not my problem. I recovered the stolen money, taught the dishonest relatives a lesson, restored justice. The Barrington family no longer exists, just a business partnership with clear roles and responsibilities. Dorothy would surely have been upset to learn of the severing of her relationship with her only son. But she didn't know what Sabrina was capable of for money, or how easily Kevin succumbed to other people's influence. Sometimes the price of family peace is too high to pay. In the evenings, I sit in the same chair, drinking the same tea, watching the same news. Life hasn't changed outwardly, but it's empty inside. There are no more Sunday lunches with relatives, no plans for a common future, no illusions of family unity. There is only justice, which turned out to be more expensive than love, but I couldn't do anything else. To allow Kevin and Sabrina to steal my money with impunity would be to consent to further abuse. Today they took $430,000. Tomorrow they would claim the house. The day after that, the rest of my property. Somewhere a boundary had to be set. I set that boundary. Clearly, firmly, definitively. The family was over. The business began. And in this business, I control 86% of the stock, which means I make the key decisions. Kevin and Sabrina can work and make money under me, or they can find another use for their talents. The choice is theirs.